You know how much fun it is to try to figure out how to make judgment relatable to kids? So if your parents want to threaten your boys and girls, I got not a whole lot. So again, we will speak to the more mature of the young. All right, let's read it. There are 6 slides. It's actually a really short parable. It's only like 3 verses long, but there's an explanation. So, 6 volunteers. Number 1, Devin. Number 2. Miss Shirley, will you do number 1? Yes, please.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people from one another as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on the left.
The king will say to those on his right, "Come you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger to you, and you welcomed me.
I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you?"
And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king answered them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, ye cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels.
For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick, and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister to you?"
Then he will answer them, saying, "Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you do not do it to me. And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life."
Does Jesus want you to be good all the time or some of the time? This points to when less people are watching, or when you think no one is watching. Even Jesus is watching. Does Jesus want you to be kind to everyone? All right. Younger group. Who are the least of these that are mentioned in the parable? Who do you think that they are? I'm not going to yell at you or throw things at you. Jesus says a couple of times, "Truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these." And in the earlier place in the parable, it also says, "You did do it to the least of these." Who do you think the least of these are? Your parents may get it wrong too. It's a great opportunity to be better. All right. Then you need to pay attention to the second half of the class, because that's where we're going. The point of the parable is that at some point, or the part that I need you to take away from tonight is that at some point, you get to stand before Jesus. You get to, again, it will be an opportunity for you. It will be an opportunity for you to be blessed by your Savior. He's already saved you. He's already saved those who are His children, or His brothers and sisters, God's children. And so at the judgment, what do you have to be afraid of? As long as this is how you're acting, providing the 7 things in the first and second halves of these parables, right? Being kind. Okay? Y'all want to skip straight to number 3? All right, adults, who is the least of these? See, the kids had the right answer.
Common everyday people. everyday people of low esteem.
If I were to ask the same question like this, who is your neighbor? How would you respond? Everyone. It's the same question. Well, my question is this. My question isn't written in the Bible. So.
Any of those that are in need of those things.
Those that you can find a way to do these things for. All right. Structure of the parable. The parable, look, this is one of those things that as a preacher or as a guy before even preaching, in doing invitations and wanting to be ready in case somebody wasn't at church on a Wednesday night, give me my opportunity to stand in front of my grandparents and say something for a couple of minutes. This place it works really well for an invitation, right? Like you read through the parable and at the end you go, if you would like to know more about how to be with the sheep and not with the goats, come forward as we stand and sing. And the whole parable it works for that. But it's really long if you're trying to use it in a sermon. So, here is your structure. You have an introduction in the first 3 verses, verses 31, 2, and 3. You have a summation in verse 46. There is something that's kind of peculiar in that the destination is rendered before the explanation. And you can explain that in many ways if you would like, but I think it's because your life is over at this point. You're just getting or not getting the reward. And so the headline, lead with the headline. You made it or you didn't make it. Now apparently Jesus is going to give a little explanation on top of that, but the destinations are given, and then there's the description of the righteous and the unrighteous. There is almost no difference in the righteous and the unrighteous whatsoever. The biggest difference that I could find between the two is that there are 7 things that are listed. And for the unrighteous, number 6 and 7 are grouped together. And they are more itemized for the righteous than the unrighteous. It's really nothing. They are almost absolutely identical. Why might that matter?
Because you're equally judged.
The same rules apply for everybody. Look, the talents could weigh into this as far as how many talents you've been given, what you are expected to do with those. But this is a baseline for treating other people, and the baseline is equal to everyone. Don't be that guy. Don't be guy number 2. Section number 2. All right. Hard questions because they go deep into theology. Remember, I like to ask trick questions. Is this a picture of final judgment? The parable. I got a yes.
I think so.
I got a yes.
Yes.
Okay. How many judgments are there going to be? This feels like a trap, doesn't it? Good, I was going for that. How many judgments will there be? 1.
I got a question.
Okay.
Okay, when you die, okay, and the saved go to paradise, and the others go to Hades, is that not a judgment?
Charles and I have a very unique outlook on how this whole thing works. Technically, no. It's not judgment. Because Jesus spent paradise with the repentant thief on the cross for 3 days. And that was 2,000 years ago. So judgment either hasn't happened yet or works completely differently.
So we won't go to paradise, we will just sleep till Jesus comes, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying you'll go to paradise. That doesn't make it judgment. And the biggest reason that it doesn't make it judgment is because the reward is paradise. It's not heaven. You don't get to go to heaven. So, getting into Disney World is really cool. Riding the monorail is really cool. Getting in the parking lot, riding, you have parked in Goofy, do not forget your spot. Like, no way. You get to ride the tram. All of that stuff is really cool. It's not the other side of the drop rope. Okay, that's a poor analogy. The waiting room is not heaven. It's paradise. But it's not. Heaven is better. Does that work?
You've been judged to put there.
Pardon?
You've been judged to put there.
Yeah. But you haven't made it to heaven. Therefore, your judgment has not been rendered
So
yet.
really there are two judgments.
No, because there's one judgment day. This is the judgment day. There is a splitting. Look, you want to hear mine and Charles Birchfield's theory? I'll throw Charles under the bus, and if I get this wrong, Charles, and you're listening, yell at me. Let me take Charles' name out of it, even though I think he agrees with me. My theory is that it's kind of like different flies hitting the windshield at the same time. Like, we may all die at separate times, but when you die, you show up at Judgment Day. It's like the end of time for everyone. Well, how does that work? Because time keeps going. Time keeps going here. God's outside of time. I'm saying time is broken after you die.
Another question.
Okay.
When you die, the
Okay.
Bible says that the dead in Christ will rise first.
Mhm.
Those that are alive will be caught up with them in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you're in paradise,
Mm-hmm.
why would that not be a difference?
What do you mean? Why would that not be a difference?
Well, I mean, because you're already judged. You're there. I mean, you know, is he going to?
Okay, you've made an assumption.
Or other.
You've made an assumption I'm not willing to give you. I said you're not judged. You are split. You're separated. You're not judged. This is a judgment. When the judge sits on the throne and judges, then you're judged. Just because you're divided while you're waiting does not mean you've been judged. There's a lot of people walking around on pretrial release right now, and considering the other alternative is to sit in county and wait for the judge to call you up and judge you, it's kind of paradise. Yes, sir.
Here's how I answer that question. And the teenagers has asked me as long as I've been teaching teenagers, and my answer is usually, it doesn't really matter. Because once you're dead, you can't fix either other way. So you've got to be prepared before you die. And my personal belief, and it's just how I guess, figured it out in my mind, is kind of like you said, I think you're kind of asleep or dreaming or whatever it may be, and then you hit the windshield and hitting it at a different time because the Bible does reference those who are dead or sleeping a lot of times, and then we're going to be called up. So that's kind of a tricky thing, and my answer to the teenagers a lot of times is be prepared when you die, because that's really your judgment day, is when you die, basically.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
But the rich man felt like he had been judged for sure when he was asking Lazarus to go, just please let him just touch his finger into the drop of water. However it happens, I don't know. I just hope I get to the good side, and I don't know about the other side. I hope I don't know that it exists.
All right. There is a final judgment. We have determined that there is one of them. Is the parable that we're reading about a separation of righteous Christians from the world? Or is it a separation of righteous Christians from unrighteous Christians? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What are the significance in sheep and goats? Goats were dirty, I guess. The goats were bad. If you were goat herders, they were kind of thought of as filthy at the time, wasn't that?
I have an answer, but I can't give it to you because it'll ruin my question.
Okay.
I'll give it to you in 5 minutes. Is this a parable to separate judgment for righteous people from the world or righteous Christians from unrighteous Christians?
Never said from the world.
Righteous Christians from unrighteous Christians, while someone simultaneously answered righteous Christians from the world. All right, good. We need tiebreakers. Mikey, what is it?
You're getting one invitation.
Oh, sorry. Damon, what is it?
I don't want to give it away yet.
Were goats used for sacrifice?
Pardon?
Were goats used for sacrifice?
I'll answer goat questions in a minute. Oh, goats.
It's final judgment, it's both.
Final judgment, it's both. The problem is that so many people take this parable and make it so much. The problem is it's because of the things that you do, right? That's one of the things we're reading about. It's because of the things that you do. Most of your denominational, we'll go with Protestant, if you'll give me that word, we'll fight about that one later. Most of your Protestant friends are going to say salvation is done by grace through faith and your works don't matter. Therefore, this is not about the final judgment.
To me, this feels like it's about exposing hypocrisy.
Yes.
So to me, that's why I chose the second one.
Mhm.
It's the ones who were not just like we learned earlier, we talked about, not just saying you're Christian, but these are the ones that were doing the actions and stuff.
So in Acts chapter 10, Cornelius is saved, right? You're introduced to Cornelius as a God-fearing individual who is not a Jew, and he is told his prayers have ascended to the Lord as a memorial, and that someone is going to send for Peter, and Peter will tell him what to do, right? He will bring him salvation. Peter shows up and preaches salvation, meaning at the beginning of Acts chapter 10, Cornelius is not salvationed. He ain't saved yet. There is a difference in good people and saved people. There is a difference in people who think they're saved and people who actually are. And that even people who think they're saved and are not, in judgment, unfortunately, will still be grouped with bad people. It is the unrighteous Christians. The unrighteous Christians are in the same position as the world. They will be among the goats who speak up. There is no difference sacrificially or importance Levitically between the sheep and the goats. They're used for similar purposes. They're used back and forth. Some of them are like the scapegoat specifically carries the sins into the wilderness after the other goat is used as the sacrifice for those sins. Also, lambs are used. Sheep are used for similar, if not the same, sacrifice throughout the scripture. There's no difference in the sheep and the goats except God's people are never referred to as goats. They're always referred to as sheep. So when you go through looking through prophecies through your Old Testament, when you go looking for things of that nature, you're even going to find shepherds. But they're shepherds for goats. But if the people are referred to, they are sheep. They're the ones who follow the shepherd. Besides, who wants to be stubborn as a goat? Anything more? Did I answer? That was your goat question, right?
Yeah, the significance between the goats and the sheep. And for some reason, I thought there was like some kind of negative connotation back when I think it was Isaac was getting. I think it was Isaac. No, Jacob.
Jacob puts on.
Jacob was bringing them
goat skin.
there, and they had to. These people were outside the city after that some reason, Because they raised the goats, they didn't want them to be in with some people, but I'm
So
confused.
the Egyptians hated shepherds.
Yeah.
Sheep
that's
and goats.
what-
Yeah, they thought shepherds were menial and below second class. Yeah.
I don't know why, I just had in my mind that all shepherds in general, but there was something about the goats in particular. And, I don't know if this has anything in the Bible significance or anything, but, Satan's often represented as a goat in some of these older pagan mythologies and stuff. Maybe that's the thing. You can look at it into it as well. Your goats in sheep's clothing that don't necessarily go.
Did I answer the goat question over here?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Is there-
I didn't hear the judgment. Is it Christians in the world or Christians and?
It is the righteous and the unrighteous, which includes unrighteous Christians and all who are unrighteous. It is it's an end of time judgment. So the problem is, if you want to split it up between, and this is the verse, this is why I got it on the board. It's the one because they call, hey, we tried to do what you said. That's where the part of the tiff comes from. The thing about it is that it's either a final judgment or it's a secondary judgment if it's going to just be Christians, good Christians and bad Christians, because it doesn't mention the world anywhere else. And then people read into it, well, who are the least of these? That means there must be a third group, right? And actually, this parable isn't talking about judgment for righteous and unrighteous people whatsoever. It's talking about people who receive Jesus' missionaries as they go out into the world and try to spread the gospel. And you're like, y'all really just make up anything you can make up to get around this whole you gotta do something while you're saved thing, huh? It's all about getting around the obedience part of salvation is where most of them come from. Y'all think kids backpedal and push away from things they don't want? Wait till you see theologians who are doing the same thing. You're like, this doesn't even make any sense. It's fun. Any other questions? All right. So Matthew has already told it, and this is part of where the missionary things come from. Jesus uses very similar language when he sends out his disciples earlier in the same book of Matthew, and even uses the cup of cold water portion. Snodgrass says, and this comes out of two different paragraphs, and I pieced it together, this picture of judgment is intended to urge the disciples to know that only faithful obedience to the will of the Father, obedience marked by love and mercy, would suffice at judgment. I'm going to interject right here. That is the whole book of 1 John in that statement. The narrative is a piece of the gospel. It is not theology in miniature. And what he is saying here is this is a picture trying to point to be obedient. It is not this is how the exact courtroom scene of judgment will play out. Here's where the defendants will stand. It's not supposed to be that deep. It's a parable. It's not the book of Leviticus. The judgment evidenced in this narrative does not ask if a person has accumulated X number of merciful acts, but asks, what kind of person are you? Again, it's not about works-based theology. It's okay. I told y'all I didn't have a whole lot of meat on this bone. Questions?
If you have good intents, if your heart is good and you want to do, but you don't do good, does that count for anything?
That was last week's parable. I'm sorry you missed it. It literally was last week's parable. The judge judges the heart. The judge judges with mercy and with grace, neither of which are mentioned in this parable. But we know from other places that that's part of his criteria in judgment. That is, parables like this don't overlook that, but they point out that you should not fully rely on that kind of mercy and grace, thinking that you can do whatever you want. See Romans chapter 2, where your deeds matter and they will be called into account. Like, you're still going to get up there and say, and God list out all of your sin. Even if he says mercy covers, he's still going to list them all out. You still got them. And I don't want him to have to read too long a list.
He didn't say you didn't clothe just the Christians that need help at your church. You didn't just give the water to the Christians at your church. The least of these. It's not, I don't think this is for, are you doing everything to help your congregation? Yes, you should. But I think it went farther than that. To just whoever, those in need.